In this episode, we're converting the ASK SDK handler structure into the Jovo intent and routing logic. Jovo works a little different compared to the ASK SDK handler structure. And so if you take a look into the source folder in the app.js file, this is where the logic is happening. And right now we have 3 intents here. Jovo has a handler structure with nested intents and states. We will take a look at states in a later step, but right now what you can see here, what we saw in the previous episode, we have this typical logic where we ask for the name and then greet the person with their names. And what we can do for now is we can get rid of these 2 intents here. Right now, just keep the launch how it is. And take a look how this compares to the ASK SDK project. So if we go back to the sample code here, the logic here usually happens in the Lambda custom folder and here in the index.js. And for this course's sake, we will also, similar to this sample project here, keep everything in one file, but we will later take a look at how to structure and organize projects that are of larger complexities that it is a little better to maintain. So if you take a look at a typical ASK SDK project, it consists of several handlers. So here we have the launch request handler, the quiz handler, the definition handler, and all of these. And every handler consists of a canHandle and also a handle method. So the canHandle checks if this handler should handle the logic. And so the canHandle takes a look at the request or the handler input here and see if this should handle it or not. And so, for example, in the first one here, we have the request type, which is launch request. And in the second one, the quiz handler, we have if it is the quiz intent or the Amazon start over intent, then handle this. And we will take a look at more complex canHandle structures in a minute. But right now, let's take a look at the launch request first. This is our first intent that we're going to convert. And so the launch request, to stay cross-platform, Jovo maps the launch request to this launch intent that we've seen here. And so we can now think about converting this structure here. And so, for example, here we have speak, a welcome message, and then reprompt the help message. And so in Jovo, this would look like this. It would be this.ask, because it will keep it open, welcome message, and then as a reprompt, help message. And that's it. And so this is how it would work. And if I run it now, and click on launch, it doesn't return anything because the welcome message isn't defined. So this throws an error at runtime, which makes sense. We don't have welcome message and help message returned. And so if we take a look and scroll all the way down, we have a bunch of constants and helper functions here. And we will need to convert a few of them, not all of them, and can later even get rid of some of them. But let's just for now copy all helpers and all constants for now here and just do something like helpers. We can get rid of the skill builder, we won't need this. And then, but after that, we can keep everything else. And so if I do Jovo run again, open the debugger and click on launch, it says the same thing. So this works. But now everything else doesn't work yet. And so, for example, if I now say, okay, I want to start a quiz, for example, this throws an error because it couldn't find the route quiz intent in my handler function. Okay, and so to do this, we're now going to set up the handler in a way that it works. So we won't care about app logic or creating the output and working with the data and so on. We will just care about the routing. And then the next step, we will then talk about the logic and creating output and so on. And so let's go back to the code. And so we will just quickly go through all and then just create the skeleton structure. And so the quiz handler, for example, it just returns true if it's either a quiz intent or an Amazon start over intent. And so what we can do here is we can add the quiz intent here. So that's the first one. And then also what's interesting here is it works for both the quiz intent and the start over intent. And we will take a look at this in a later step. Just keep this in mind. And next one is the definition handler, which is interesting here because it uses a state as well. It looks if it is an answer intent, and if it's not in the quiz state, this gets triggered. So what does that mean? It's not in the quiz state. And so if we take a look at the states here, we can find out we have two states. One is called start and one is called quiz. Let's take a look at how Jovo works with states. In Jovo, we have nested states. And so we have a follow-up state or a set state. We'll take a look at this in a bit. And then we can add objects and even nested objects where we can have intents inside a state. And so what we like about this is it's like a routing file for web development, for example. We have everything in one place. Even if we just call methods outside to keep it organized, we still, by taking one look at the whole routing, we still understand and have the overview of, okay, if this intent is called at this state, then it goes in there and not in there. And so we don't lose the overview here. We can do this here as well. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add two states, and I'm not going to do it like this here. And we usually do something like start state and quiz state. We usually have the convention to add the word state behind it and intent behind it so that we just know what it is while looking at it. But feel free to do whatever you want, to name it whatever you want. And so we have two states. And if we take a look back and go back to the definition handler here, it says it should handle it if it's not in the quiz state and it's an answer intent. So what that means is it should handle it either in the start state or the quiz state. If I do that now, add an answer intent here, it does the same thing basically for the answer intent outside the state and inside the state, but it does something different for the answer intent in the quiz state, which we'll take a look at later. And the good thing here about Jovo is we have fallback situation. So if it goes into the start state and can't find an answer intent there, it just falls back into the outside answer intent. And so we can just keep the answer intent here. No need to add something here to the start state for now. And so this is how it would look like here. And then if we go to the next one, the quiz answer handler, this one has the answer intent in the state quiz. And so this is something different. And this is why we can go here and add it here. And so this is where states can get very helpful. So if I am just in a deep invocation, like ask my quiz game to tell me about Wisconsin, for example, then it would go in there. But if I'm in a state and if I'm asked a question, then it would have a different effect on the whole conversation. And so states can be really helpful to track the current state or the current situation in a conversation. And so this is how this looks like in the quiz answer handler. And then we have some other things here. We have the Amazon.repeat handler, for example, which is also only in the quiz state for now. And so we would need it to add it here as a string. And so this would throw an error here. And so this is why you need to make sure that it is a string. And then we have the help handler, same thing here. And one more thing that I noticed, so there seems to be a typo here in the example, and so it's important to use the repeat intent here, and also use the Amazon.help intent here in the help handler. So there seems to be some mistake based on the conversion from ASK SDK v1 to v2 of the project. So we can add the help intent here, which is stateless. And then we have an exit handler as well. And now I would like to show you something. So what they do here, they have for the same thing, for the stop intent, for the pause intent, and the cancel intent, they use the same handler. And we have something in Jovo that's called an intent map. An intent map defines what types of intents should go into which handlers in the Jovo routing structure. So if you go to the config.js file, you can see that there's already the stop intent mapped to an end function. So the end intent, this is something that we have in Jovo that acts like a last handler that is called when someone ends the session, for example, when someone calls stop and stuff like that. And so we have this here, and we can add the end intent here, and the stop intent is already routed there. And so what we can do, we can also similar to this exit handler, we can also map the cancel intent and the pause intent to this. And so for these intents, the end intent would be called. And what I like to do as well is I usually like to map built-in intents to this structure as well. So for example, I would map the Amazon.help intent to just the help intent in case I want to have a cross-platform experience that it has a little better readability. I like to do that usually. This here changes nothing in the logic. It just makes it a little more readable, in my opinion. And now that we have taken a look at the intent map, we can also take a look again at the quiz intent here. And so for the quiz intent, or for the quiz handler, we also have the Amazon start over intent. And so what we could do is we could just use the Amazon start over intent and map it to the quiz intent, for example, and this would work. I want to introduce you to another concept though, which is intent redirects. So sometimes like globally mapping intents together can be difficult because sometimes different intents might have different meanings. So start over intent might mean something else than start a quiz intent in some states, for example. And so what we have as Jovo is we have intent redirects. And so what we could do is we could have something like Amazon start over intent here and do return this dot to intent quiz intent. And so this would just redirect when it goes in here, it would just redirect to the quiz intent. And if we had in a different state, if we had a different state here, for example, we could do something else. So we could have those two intents have them say something different. If we use the intent map, we don't have this flexibility. And so this is why we usually use redirects for something like this as opposed to the intent map. We can use the intent map for this though. So we can keep it in the intent map and just map it to start over intent to keep it organized. And that's it. And then if we go back, we have a session ended request handler, which is already, so session ended requests are also mapped to end. We can take a look at this later. And then the last thing here is an error handler. So this works different compared to the others. We can add error handlers here. And so this is helpful when something throws an error that we can take a look at these and so on. Jovo offers an on error intent for this. And this is it. This is how the routing structure looks like. There's one thing that's interesting in my opinion is that start state seems to have gotten lost in there. So right now there doesn't seem to be any use of it. Sometimes it can be tempting to just use a lot of states, but in my opinion, voice applications need to be as horizontal as possible because conversations, they don't look like flowcharts. Typically people just use different intents and so on, just ask something here and then move to that direction. So having as little states as possible is usually recommended by us. And so what we will do here, we will just get rid of the start state and then that's it. And so this is how the structure looks like. And what we did in the launch intent here was already a sneak peek into how we can convert the handle structure or the handle functions in the ASK SDK projects to the Jovo app logic in the Jovo Framework structure. And we will take a look at this in the next video. We'll go through all these intents and make the whole app work.